set intensifiers, how do you account them in your weekly training volume? Do you see a drop set or a rest pause set as one set, half a set, or a third of a set? Do not take time under tension into consideration of these sets. Jonathan, you want this first, or you want me to answer it?
I'll have a go. Yes. So, by sound of it, he is asking what counts as training volume and what counts as a set. Now, this is a very individual, how long is a piece of string kind of question and answer. So I wouldn't be able to give you a direct guideline on what you should do. So this is where you watch our videos and you find out, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what's not working, back and forth kind of thing. You should take the information from these into account when you're asking questions. You'll be able to find a way to apply what you've experienced and what you currently experience in your training, and think about how that's going to go towards getting you better results. So to outline what I think is what constitutes as training volume or a set. If you do 3 sets of 10 and perhaps you have a minute rest between them, yes, you're doing 3 sets of 10 repetitions. So you'd log that as, assuming you're using the same weight, you might write 3 times 10, 50 kilos, or whatever weight you have to be using. And obviously the exercise at the top, so lat pull down, for example. So that's 3 sets. If you're going to then say, okay, I'm going to move on to a chest supported row, you might do 1 straight set, so 1 times 10, the weight, so say 50 kilos again. Then say, for example, you think, I'm going to add some spice to the mix. I'm going to up the ante. You'll do a rest pause set, perhaps. So then it'll be 1 times 10 dash 4 dash 3 dash 2. Now, the 10 at the start is just whatever default hypothetical number that you're trying to achieve on that set is. So it's not a set in stone amount. The second set, assuming you're taking your first set to failure, will be less than your first set, of course, because you're losing muscle strength. The fibers are almost burnt out. They're exhausted. So you might do 10, then 4. Then again, it'll be more exhausted. So you might do 3, then for example, 2. So that would all constitute 1 set. So the way I'd write that is 10-4-3-2. Then the idea of that is that you keep the same rest period between each of those, what I call mini sets. So it's still one overarching set comprised of mini sets. So you try to keep that amount the same. So you can either use the amount of breaths you take as your default measurement,
looks like
or
Jonathan.
you can use time.
You knocked off for the last maybe 5 or 6 seconds.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to recap those thoughts, but you said that you consider that 1 set and you're trying to hold the time steady with those mini sets. And then anything you kind of said after that got lost.
Yeah. So you're trying to keep the time the same amount. So it's standardized. So what I mean by that is you're doing perhaps 3 breaths, 4 breaths, 5 breaths. So find an amount that works for you. Or you might do 10, 15 seconds. You can time that, but I find that it takes away from the intensity if you're looking at a phone, looking at things on the wall, clocks, It can be another thing to think about, which takes away from the intensity of the workout itself. So that's how I'd consider a set to be made up of. Now, in terms of time and tension, I do have a video on my channel which I answered from Zbigniew, I believe with Jerome at some point. I believe it is out already, or it might be out in the next few weeks. It's something like what counts as time and tension. I think personally that the 3 sets of 10 would count as, assuming you took 60 seconds to do each set, it'd be 60, 20, 180. So 180 seconds, 3 sets. If your rest pause set is, say counting the time but not the reps itself, it might be, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 4 seconds, something like that. Then that would be, I need to do math here, 48 seconds or whatever it happens to be. So that would count as a time and tension for that set. And that is not including the rest time between those sets. So that's how I'd calculate time and tension. Now, if you're looking at it from the point that you want to make it simple, then assuming you could standardize the time and tension, the rest between each set, or each mini set of that rest pause set, then you might say, okay, I'm going to take exactly 10 seconds between each mini set. You might then just count the whole set. So for example, you might say, I'm always doing 10 seconds rest between 3 sets, so 30 seconds. You'll take that away from the full set itself. So if you know you spent 2 minutes doing the set, so 90 seconds for the whole set. That's how I'd work out time and tension. So you got two different metrics there, a way to log the workout, what counts as rest pause set, and how that might apply to your training.
Excellent. So the way that I see it, everything you do from the time that you start the exercise until when you finally set the weight down and you're done, I consider that one set, whether you have intensifiers in there or not. With myself and with my clients, I like all of my sets to be from anywhere from 45 seconds up to about 2 minutes. And if someone can't get 60 seconds on their own, to the point of concentric failure, and they start failing before then I'll start using set intensifiers to get them up to anywhere from 90 seconds to 2 minutes. But I still consider that one set. In that regard, it doesn't matter really, in a sense, if you count that as one set or 2 sets or 3 sets or however many sets, as long as you're tracking it consistently. If you call that 5 sets, just be consistent when you do it and call it 5 sets if they're rest pause or drop sets or whatever. But the consistency is what is important there. And I take those times, even if I'm doing rest pause, I take the total number of time for that set into consideration. So whenever I do rest pause with clients, I almost always do 5 seconds with rest pause, because I don't do a lot of rest pause repetitions, even though I do use rest pause with clients. So if somebody hits concentric failure on their own, they're lifting as hard as they can, the weight is not moving up, they're pushing, their face is turning red, they're continuing to breathe, they're shaking a little bit and it's not moving, and we're right at 45 seconds. Usually at that point, we could either do forced repetitions, and I'll make a note on their progress chart that at 45 seconds, that's where they stopped on their own. And then we'll either do forced repetitions, we'll do drop sets, or we'll do rest pause until they hit generally 90 seconds. Depending on the client, sometimes I take that a little bit longer, closer to 2 minutes. So don't get too caught up in trying to figure out exactly how to count and measure all of this. If you're consistent and if your numbers are moving up in the gym, then whatever you're doing is good enough at that time. And you can always make a different distinction down the road.
Yeah, I can certainly vouch for that opinion. At the end of the day, we can get very nitty gritty, very granular, very scientific, very calculated about our training. Yeah. Ultimately, we're not robotic. So what will apply in one workout might not apply to the next workout. Your rest periods won't always be exactly 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes. You might forget to time your set. Your shoulder might be bad like mine was today, so I wasn't able to lift in the same sort of rep range I was previously. So there's always going to be something which can prevent you from being perfect and tracking exactly as you want. My best suggestion to anyone that's concerned about time to tension, doing a bit too much or a bit too little, is just get stuck in with it and find something that works. Look at your metrics from your workouts, look at your training performance, look at your improvements week on week and see, is it working or is it not working? If it isn't working, go back to the drawing board and start again.
Andre, you and I are in a lot of the same circles, and same with Jonathan. There's a lot of people within the HIIT community that have varying thoughts about set intensifiers. So if you were to hypothetically ask this same question to 10 or 100 different people within the high intensity training community, you might get 10 or 100 different answers. When I was talking to Rick Chartrand, he told me he interviewed someone recently who, as soon as their repetition slows down on that last repetition or two, they consider that when the set has essentially reached failure. So for that individual, if they're following a 4-4 cadence and all of a sudden, one of those last repetitions starts taking 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds, they consider the set is over there. People like Drew Bay think set intensifiers are basically pointless to use to try and raise the intensity. I enjoy using them, but I use them in the context of trying to keep every set within a somewhat narrow range of time under tension. So you're going to get a lot of different opinions, but Jonathan is absolutely right in what he said, that just see how it works for you and your training and anybody that you might exercise with. And if it's not working, then you go back to the drawing board and make the adjustment. So you're going to get a broad variety of answers with this question.
Yes, I completely agree. it's very challenging when there's lots of people out there with different points of view. Which is why we try to make very specific standpoints in what we say. So when we're talking about concentric muscular failure, we're talking about getting to the point where you can no longer move the weight in a positive fashion. It's not going anywhere. So for example, God forbid, the bench press, you've got it down here, you push it out to here, without like straining something or using inertia to actually move the weight further forward. That's what I call concentric muscular failure, where there's no more go to it. That's where I'd say to a lot of people at least stop. That's not to say you could take it to the next level, do the static. You can hold at that position for a bit, probably for quite a good period of time. Then if you're even more advanced and you've got the recovery capacity, you can lower it, do the eccentric phase. And that's also under the premise that you're lowering it as slow as you can. So there's lots of ways to skin a cat. And I find rest pauses quite fun because they do extend your sets and they kind of measure how much intensity you can put over a long period of time. Because I think that's what us men like to do, like see how much we can suffer.